The car that picks you up from school is not a car. It's an armored Mercedes with run-flat tires and a driver who has never once told you his last name. You are 11 years old. You don't know what your father does. You know the dacha has a gate that takes 4 seconds to close. You know the men who stand outside it don't smile. You know that when your father takes a phone call, everyone in the room leaves the room. You file this away the way children file away things they're not supposed to understand yet. Your father is Mikhail Petrovich Volkov. He is not on any Forbes list that he hasn't approved. The real number, the one his accountants know and you will eventually learn, is somewhere north of $4 billion, distributed across holding companies in Cyprus, the British Virgin Islands, a shell in Luxembourg that owns a shell in Delaware that owns a building in London that nobody ever uses. He made it in the 1990s, during the decade when the Soviet Union's carcass was being divided up and the men fast enough and ruthless enough and connected enough got to decide who held the knife. Your father held the knife. You don't know this yet. You're 11. You're worried about your French exam. You grow up inside the bubble the way all oligarch children grow up inside it, which is to say, you barely notice it's a bubble until you're outside it and the air feels wrong. The international school in Moscow, where everyone's father does something important and nobody talks about what. The summers in Sardinia on a boat that requires a crew of 9. The apartment in Kensington that your mother calls the London flat in the same tone other people say the spare room. You have tutors for violin, for English, for equestrian. You have a bodyguard named Artyom who follows you at a distance of exactly 12 feet and never gets any closer unless someone is moving toward you faster than walking pace. You think everyone lives this way. Then you go to university in London and realize they don't. At 18, you are beautiful, fluent in 4 languages, and completely unprepared for a world that doesn't rearrange itself around you. You study international relations at King's College because your father wants you to understand power structures and your mother wants you to meet a suitable husband, and you have not yet figured out that these 2 goals are the same goal. You share a seminar table with students who work part-time jobs at coffee shops. You don't understand why until one of them explains rent to you and you sit there doing arithmetic in your head that doesn't compute. You call your father that night. He wires £20,000 to your account by morning. The problem disappears. This is how problems have always worked in your life. The first time you understand who your father actually is, you're 22. You're at a dinner in Mayfair, a fundraiser for something, a children's hospital or a museum or a political foundation. The causes blur together because they're all the same cause, which is access. A British MP takes your father aside near the bar and they talk quietly for 4 minutes, and afterward, the MP is different. Not visibly different, but different in the way a man is different when he's just been told the terms. You watch your father's face during the conversation. He's smiling. His eyes are not. You fly back to London the next morning, and you don't call him for 2 weeks. Then you call him because you need your lease renewed, and he's the one who holds the account. The problem disappears. This is the pattern you will spend the next decade trying to name. You're 26 when the sanctions hit. Not the first round. Those you barely felt, a few awkward conversations at dinner parties, some journalists your father called parasites on a phone call you weren't supposed to overhear. The second round. The real one. 3 weeks after Russian tanks cross into Ukraine in the middle of the night, and the photographs start coming in from Kyiv and Mariupol and Bucha, and the world that had been tolerating men like your father for 30 years suddenly decides, all at once, and not entirely convincingly, that it cannot tolerate them anymore. Your bank account freezes on a Tuesday. You find out at a checkout in Waitrose. Your card declines, then declines again. You stand there with a bottle of olive oil and a bag of pasta, and you feel something shift in your chest, something you don't have language for yet, which is the first tremor of a structure you'd been standing on your whole life beginning to give way underneath you. You call the bank. They refer you to a number. The number refers you to a government portal. The portal has a form that requires documentation you don't have. Your father's lawyers are unreachable. His assistant in Moscow says he's traveling. Where? She doesn't know. You eat the olive oil and the pasta that night because you paid for them in cash from your wallet, and you sit in the Kensington flat that you now understand is not yours, was never yours, is listed as an asset of a company registered in Cyprus that is now under review by the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation. And you think about Artyom, standing 12 feet back, never closer, and you understand for the first time that the distance was never about discretion. The flat gets seized in May. You have 3 weeks' notice. Your mother calls from Moscow and cries. Your father calls once from a number you don't recognize and says to stay calm. Says his lawyers are working on it, says this is political, says these things sort themselves out. He sounds like a man describing the weather in a country he's not in. You don't hear from him again for 4 months. You move in with a university friend in Hackney. She's kind about it. Her flatmates are less kind. You overhear one of them say your name in the kitchen, and the word blood money follows it, not quietly enough. You lie in the spare room that night, and you try to decide whether she's wrong. You're still trying to decide. You'll be trying to decide for the rest of your life. The journalists find you in June, not the tabloids, the serious ones, the ones with the research teams and the offshore financial documents and the 6-month investigations. Your father's name is in 3 separate reports now, connected to a steel company in the Urals that took its contracts through a ministry official who is connected to a procurement fraud, that is connected to a slush fund, that is connected to a name you have seen on television standing next to the president. There are wire transfers. There are dates. There are amounts with too many zeros. You read all of it. You read it 3 times. Then you close your laptop and go for a walk along the canal, and you watch a heron standing completely still in the water, and you think about being 11 years old in the armored car and how the gate took 4 seconds to close, and you wonder what you were supposed to have done differently and when. A journalist emails you, then another, then a documentary filmmaker. You don't respond, not because you have anything to hide. You don't, or at least not anything that's yours, but because you don't know what to say, because any sentence you construct that begins with your father ends in a place you're not ready to stand. Your visa is tied to a residency status that was tied to your father's investment portfolio, which is now under review. The Home Office sends a letter in August. You have a solicitor now, a real one that you're paying for yourself from the money you make teaching Russian conversation to expat businessmen twice a week at £50 an hour. It's not enough. Nothing about your current life is structured to be enough. The solicitor says you have options. They just aren't the options you grew up expecting to have. You go back to Moscow for Christmas, not because you want to, but because your mother is alone, and because you don't know how long you'll be able to go back at all. Your father is there, thinner than you remember, older in a way that seems sudden even though it isn't. The dacha is the same. The gate still takes 4 seconds. There are still men outside it who don't smile. But there are more of them now, and they watch the road with a different quality of attention. You sit across from your father at dinner and you look at his hands. They're the same hands, broad, deliberate, the hands of a man who learned to do physical work before he learned that he didn't have to. He asks about London. You tell him about the visa situation, about the account, about the flat. He listens. He says his lawyers are working on it. You ask him what specifically they are working on. He looks at you for a moment like he's deciding something. Then he says, "These are complicated matters." You say, "I know. I've been reading about them." He doesn't answer. He passes you the bread. You fly back to London on the 2nd of January. You don't know it's the last time you'll see him for 3 years. The documentary comes out in March. Your name is in it twice. Not as an accused, not as a witness, just as a daughter, just as a biographical fact. They use a photograph from your Instagram that you posted 4 years ago, you on the boat in Sardinia, laughing at something off camera. You look at that photograph now, and you can see exactly what they want you to see when you look at it, and you can't make yourself not see it. You delete the Instagram. Too late. Screenshots are permanent. The internet has the photograph now, and the internet keeps things forever. You apply for a graduate program in international development. Your personal statement takes 11 drafts. In the final version, you do not mention your father. You mention your education, your languages, your interest in sanctions policy, and financial transparency. All of it is true. None of it is complete. The program accepts you. You're not sure whether to feel relieved or like you've gotten away with something. You don't know whether those are different things. The visa gets resolved in November, on terms your solicitor calls acceptable and that you understand, mean the Home Office knows exactly who you are and has decided you are more useful inside the country than outside it. You sign documents. You cooperate with a review board. You answer questions about your father's finances that you mostly can't answer because you genuinely don't know, which is its own kind of answer. The reviewer, a quiet woman in her 50s, looks at you at one point with an expression you've been seeing a lot lately. Not hostility, something more complicated. The look of someone trying to figure out where culpability ends and inheritance begins. You don't have an answer for her. You're still working on it. Your father is sanctioned personally in the second quarter of the following year. Asset freeze, travel ban, his name on a list that has his photograph next to it in the same file format as the photographs of other men. Men you've seen on the news, men whose choices are described in language that makes your stomach feel like cold water. He calls you from a number you don't recognize. He says the list is political. He says the charges are fabricated. He says history will correct this. You say, maybe. He says, you don't believe me. You say, I believe that you believe it. He goes quiet for a long time. Then he says, you sound like your mother. You don't know if that's a compliment. You think he doesn't know either. You finish the graduate program in the spring. You get a position with an NGO that works on illicit financial flows, specifically on the mechanisms that allow decades of stolen public money to move through Western financial systems, while those systems politely looked away. The pay is £31,000 a year. You live in a flatshare in Peckham with two other women who don't know who your father is, and you have decided not to tell them. The work is detailed and difficult, and some days you sit at your desk reading documents about asset structures in jurisdictions you traveled to as a child. The British Virgin Islands, Cyprus, Luxembourg, and you trace the shapes of them and recognize in the architecture something familiar. The way the distance is maintained. The way the structure is designed so that no single layer has to know what the whole structure is for. You are good at this work. You know how it's built from the inside. Your colleagues think you got into this field because of the war, because of Ukraine, because of the righteous anger that the invasion generated in millions of people who hadn't been paying attention before. This is partly true. But the other part, the part you don't explain at the Thursday team meetings, is that you got into this field because of a car that took 4 seconds to close its gate and a driver whose last name you never learned. You're 29 now. You haven't been to Sardinia in 3 years. The boat is seized. Your father's photograph is on a government list in 6 countries. Your mother has moved to Dubai, where the money that got there before the sanctions is still legal, technically, pending review. She sends you photos of the apartment sometimes. It's smaller than the dacha. The gate, if she mentions it, is automatic. Your father is in Moscow. You talk occasionally, short calls, practical things. A document he needs, a question about your visa status, updates on the legal proceedings that are taking years and costing money that may or may not belong to him in any stable legal sense. He sounds tired now in a way he didn't before. Not sad. Your father is not a man who does sad, but tired. Like a man carrying something he expected to be able to put down by now. You don't ask him the questions you want to ask him. You're not sure you want the answers. You're not sure the answers would be what you imagine them to be, which is worse in a different way. The work continues. The financial systems that move the money are still there mostly. Some reforms, some prosecutions, some men on lists who will die on lists, wealthy enough inside the seizure orders to live comfortably inside a circle that has simply gotten smaller. The iron gate still closes. It just closes a little slower. You read about a ruling one afternoon that partially lifts a subclause of a sanctions framework affecting a holding company that is, through 3 intermediary structures, connected to assets your father declared in 2019. You sit with that for a moment. Then you go back to the document you were working on. You have a photograph on your desk. Not the one from Instagram, a different one, older. You're 8, maybe 9. You're standing next to your father in the snow outside the dacha, wearing a red coat you remember loving. He's holding your hand. He looks at the camera. You look at him. You don't know what he's thinking in the photograph. You never asked. He was your father, and the gate was closing, and the men outside it didn't smile, and none of that seemed like something you needed to understand. You were 8. The red coat was warm. You were never going to be just a daughter. You were also always going to be this: a woman sitting at a desk in Peckham, tracing money through the places she used to vacation, trying to decide every day what she owes for an inheritance she didn't choose, building a small and serious life in the long shadow of a very large gate. The work doesn't end. It doesn't close into something clean. You just keep doing it day after day in a city that contains you without belonging to you, following the money through structures that were designed never to be followed, trying to find where the distance ends. You haven't found it yet.